of an in-depth analysis on President Tiniubu's directive to the Nigerian military to comb and clear the forest in Kebbi and Niger, as well as Kwara states. I'm now joined by Salihu Dantaata, a security expert. Thank you so much for being on the news tonight.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
I mean, when you heard that directive by the president, what was your response? The president is now ordering the military to comb forest in Kwara, Kebbi, Niger axis with a 24-hour surveillance. But given the size and scale of the abductions we've seen, does that solve the problem? To what extent does it solve the problem?
Well, I think to 50%.
Okay.
Because when you're talking about combing, you can comb, come back to base, and they return to normal business. Because for us that knows the terrain from Kebbi, Niger, and Kwara states, these are states that does exchange trading on market days. For instance, people leave Wara in Kebbi State, in Gaski in Kebbi State, Gumbi in Kebbi State, en route Agwara, Babana, Shwashi, Wawa to Kayama on market days of these different times. Kayama, for instance, is in Kwara North, where Itato, the Mahmuda terrorists, threatened the communities. Then Wawa is in Niger State, where the Mahmuda terrorist leader, Abba, was arrested by the Department of State Services. Then Yawuri, Wara, Ngaski, Gumbi, and others are in Kebbi State. And what these non-state actors do in these areas is sometimes they leave their weapons and arms in the forests, come into the main communities, disguise, sit with them, eat, wine, and dine with them, even have female friends among them, particularly in the brothels, where you call dandalis and host of others. So this makes it very, very difficult for maybe instant onslaught to be able to wipe them away, because just the way the government has announced, they also listen to information. And don't forget, a lot of people around these areas are not aware of their ownership involvement. Then there are also things the Commander-in-Chief, President Bola Ahmed Tiniubu, need to take into consideration. There are certain reasons why these non-state actors find these abandoned wildlife forests as solace. One exit point, Itato, before the Beninois authorities, combed Babana to Benin Republic border, Chikanda to Benin Republic border. These were their exit routes after they wreaked the havoc in Kebbi, Kwara, and Niger. But as it stands, the Beninois part have come there with their gendarmes and their intelligence officers, and escape routes now become difficult. Beyond that also, most of these communities also have some unscrupulous elements who are indigenous, who aid and abets them. In fact, in under Kayama local government and Borgu local government area of Kwara and Niger states, there are towns where illegal mining, gold mining, is taking place unchecked. Several intelligence information have been given, and you know, predominantly people in Kwara North local governments of Kayama and Baruten are farmers, as well as those of Borgu and Wata, who to some extent are fishermen and women. For example, in Wara, for instance, is waterway. So sometimes some of these non-state actors also use the waterways to escape. So except if the Nigerian Navy is going to also be dragged into this to comb the maritime waters. But if you rely on the forest alone, with some of the informants among the towns and villages, it is going to be difficult, because the more you do it, the more the disguise come amongst the people. And you know, the Air Force wouldn't like to record casualties of innocent people.
Interesting that you paint these pictures. So far, we haven't had any directive given to the Nigerian Navy, even though we do know they also have their work cut out for them. The president's directive is to the Army, though in general, and the Air Force. He did particularly single out the Air Force yesterday in that directive. Today we are hearing further directives for mass recruitment, 50,000 personnel now to the police. The armed forces is also expected to recruit more. Does that move the needle for you? Is it enough to recruit? We are also we've also been told by the president that the DSS should train and deploy forest guards into this forest. So it does look like the attention is on the forests.
Well, the President and Commander-in-Chief's gesture, after yearnings by Nigerians, is a step towards the right direction. Beyond just recruitment, what about the structures that we accommodate the because we've been saying there is shortage of manpower. What also happens to their welfare? You see, there are certain things the Commander-in-Chief also need to take into consideration.
Such as?
Only welfare, because the morale of particularly the other ranks and rank and file of both the armed forces and the police is low. Because when you talk about field onslaught, before you find 5 colonels, you find more than 300 privates of the army. Before you find maybe 6 commissioners or deputy commissioners of police or assistant commissioners of police, you find more than 300 constables. The welfare of the other ranks and rank and file of both the armed forces, police, DSS and others is nothing to write home about. The places they stay before carrying out this onslaught, you shed tears. We have been opportune to visit. Let me give you an example. At the time the bandits in the abandoned Wawa Wildlife Forest threatened the 101 battalion in Kanji as well as the air weapons school that they are coming to attack them because some of the notorious bandits and terrorists were detained there. The commanding officer for 101 battalion, then a major, as well as the Air Force base commandant of the air weapons school, they collaborated. Before they came, they blocked the road from Kanji to Wawa. Even some community leaders were complaining, but that gathered momentum. At the time the non-state actors came, they wasted them in mass, including seizing their weapons, operational vehicles, and lots of others. So what I'm trying to talk about, even though with the additional manpower, it is not to say that the existing manpower don't have the wherewithal. What is lacking is the welfare for a man that is giving his life, our life, for the defense of territorial integrity of Nigeria. Salary is nothing to run about, no hazard, no insurance. Go to military hospital in Kaduna, 44. Go to Maiduguri military hospital and other military hospitals. You see some of them, amputated, becoming disabled and what have you. 6 months, they send their families out of the barrack. This extends to all the arms of the armed forces, DSS, police, and host of others. So I think, Mr. President, with due respect, all he has done is good because he has shown that he's a listening president. He should also mandate the Ministry of Finance, Army Finance, Air Force Finance, Naval Finance, Police Finance, DSS Finance, and finances of other paramilitary agencies to make proposals to the standing committees of both the upper and lower chamber for hazards and insurance to be included, including making their salary attractive so that if they are sacrificing, they know they have something to fall out in case of disability. And
their families, indeed. I mean, you painted a picture where Benin Republic has blocked, what usually was their exit roads.
Yes.
And now the attention seems to be on forests, particularly the North Central, Kwara, Kebbi, Niger. Yes. One wonders how realistically the manpower we have and the inclusion of recruitment, whenever that happens, how realistically can they comb the large ungoverned spaces that we have for this forest? Isn't that just pushing them from one end to the other end? And I also wanted you to speak to these recent rescues by non-kinetic measures that we have been told. We've just heard a story from Kogi State where an abduction was foiled, and we're told that also they ran into the forest. Are you concerned that these measures may not be tackling issues such as terror funding, following the money, the operational structures of these terrorists, and their logistical support?
Well, you see, this joint operation that is going to happen on the combing and onslaught, if given welfare, logistics, intelligence gathering gadgets, as well as collaboration with the communities at the receiving end, they can do it. Don't forget, even though we have many ungoverned areas, there are certain areas. Let me give you an example of Kanji, where you have the largest dam. Already there is air weapons school there. We have 101 battalion, another battalion. Then when you move to Kayama, there are outstations of the army. then already divisional headquarters, then civil defense and host of orders. Then DSS also have representation. So what they are going to have, and again, Operation Fansanyama has been in charge of these areas. They were the ones that assisted in Rijau, Kontangora, Ibeto, Auna, and host of orders. So all this will come in combined, but it all goes down to what budget they are to be given. Give them enough funds, gadgets, then there should also be supervision. This shouldn't be a case of saying maybe one brigadier general. No. Since you are going to have Air Force, you are going to have Army, Police, DSS. If a deputy director general from Department of State Service headquarters goes to supervise the DSS, it will go a long way. If about 2 major generals goes at the part of Army, it will go a long way. If 2 air vice marshals from Air Force, it will go a long way. If 2 AIGs go, because sometimes these boys too, even with welfare, when there are certain superior officers supervising them, because they want that commendation.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Then coming to issue of a non-kinetic measure, you see there are certain aspects that requires that, because no commander-in-chief would want the child of a peasant person or maybe one poor person to be killed. So I think sometimes you succumb to that in order to save lives, which is worth it.
All right, security expert Salio Dantaata, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on these developing matters.